Okay. Okay. Let me start letting people in. It is very rainy in Toronto today.
Same in Boston.
Oh, really? I just got back from Costa Rica and they've had like an unnormal amount of rain. It was raining for like 12 days straight, and they had to close all the national parks in the entire country and a bunch of roads, and one of the airports closed, which they said was for repairs, but that does not sound right. So I've just been like wet for a week basically, and like none of my clothes was ever able to dry. So people are starting to come in. We can give it a few minutes before we do our intros, and then I will keep this open as people filter in. Are you doing anything for your birthday today, Haley?
I was watching Harry Potter this morning, because it's rainy and disgusting here. But no, I'm going out later this evening, I think, to one of the Christmas bars in Boston.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and then celebrating this weekend.
Nice. Boston looks quite festive.
It gets very into the holiday season. We have like 10 new Christmas pop-ups and Hanukkah pop-ups in the city. And they've put up like 15 Christmas trees all over the city.
That's so fun. We have quite a few Christmas bars as well, and a couple new ones popping up. Are there any in Ottawa, Emily? Some.
Yep, I'm finding them all over Instagram, so I'm saving them.
Yeah. Oh, fun.
Yeah.
They've started doing the Toronto Christmas market like it's already open, or I feel like they open it like mid-November, so Christmas is just way longer.
It is. The one in Ottawa's opening this weekend.
Okay, that's also pretty early still.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to be mindful of everybody's time so we can get started, and this will be recorded for anybody, and I'll keep letting people in as they see them come in on my screen. But for everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Sandra. I'm the owner of Origin Travels, creating small group trips to maximize your vacation days. And today we've got a lovely panel of women who have made travel a big part of their lifestyle. So we're super excited to chat with you all, and thank you for coming. Why don't we go around and do a quick little intro of everybody? Can start with Emily. You're the first one on my screen.
I was afraid I was. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Hi, I'm Emily Gillespie. I'm known as Emily Who Explores on social. I'm a content creator and marketer specializing in outdoor and travel businesses and brands. I love working with these businesses, brands, and creators because they share a passion for adventure, experiences, and authenticity. Really embracing like the freedom exploration. So whether it's in nature, outdoorsy things through travel, or just lifestyle experiences. I get to work with them on their content and their marketing to put efforts towards connecting with their audience that feels genuine and impactful and aligned with who they are.
Thank you. Kateryna, you're next on my screen.
Fun. Hi, I'm Kateryna. I'm a Toronto-based travel writer and photographer. I've been blogging for about a decade, I say, as a hobby, but not really because it is a lot of work. And over the last few years, I've kind of begun more actively to pursue partnerships and campaigns and travel journalism, which is a whole other beast. outside of the travel world, I actually work as a freelance designer and researcher, mostly for tech startups. And then I also operate an online music magazine, which sometimes also takes me on travel adventures.
Amazing. Erin?
Yeah, hi, I'm Erin. I am a marketer in the tech industry by day and a travel writer and podcaster by night. I write the blog Pina Travels and I host the podcast Curious Tourism. I also have a pretty wide following across Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. And yeah, my community is dedicated to exploring ways that we can travel in a way that is better for people and the planet. So all of my content is focused around, yeah, responsible tourism and how to travel more sustainably.
Oh, Haley?
Hi, I'm Hayley. I'm from London originally, but live in Boston. I work as head of marketing at a hotel here in the city. And then on the side, I also do travel journalism for some magazines like Condé Nast, Business Insider, and Time Out. So it's a lot to juggle, but really fun. I'm traveling almost every month. I think by the end of this year, I officially would have traveled every single month, which has been amazing. So yeah, that's me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So everybody's a little bit different with what they do and how they fit travel into their life, which is why I thought you would all be amazing to have for this conversation. And we all get asked, how do you travel so much all the time, especially with full-time jobs and just a business, running a business, all that is a lot to juggle. So I think people feel like time is a big hindrance. And when you have a typically like let's say 2 to 4 weeks of vacation, it can feel like it's not enough to travel, but we're all doing it. So we can get into that for you, Haley, because you're working a full-time job in marketing, just like me. How do you manage that around your full 9 to 5?
So I think I'm in a nice place of being head of the department. So I get a lot of flexibility in my job, which is quite nice. And I think it's important when you start any new job to kind of set your boundaries and what's important to you. And being from Europe, I did, come into this position and say work-life balance was kind of key for me. And, I would be traveling and I did ask them if they were okay with that before accepting the position. So I think maximizing my time and working, with travel and doing the 9 to 5, I use my remote days, PTO, and then any paid holidays we have like pretty strategically. Um, so in the beginning of the year, for example, I'll kind of plan out a calendar and, choose all of the holidays that we get paid for. And I'll typically do long weekend trips. Obviously, if it's more than a week, I am typically using PTO for that. But I think using the remote day, say on a Friday, and then if we have a Monday off, that's been really helpful. So I think just maximizing and just being flexible with those days that I do have.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely planning around the long weekends is a great strategy. And Erin, you're the same, kind of set that standard for your job with your employer as well, but also a little bit different because you quit your full-time job to go long-term travel and then came back to it. So what was that experience like and what made you decide to do that?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Haley says because it's so true. Like when you're looking for a job, you need to be upfront about the fact that like travel is very important to you. That's something I've done as well. And I will only work remote jobs. I'm head of marketing as well, and my job is totally remote. And that is a big reason why I and travel a lot. But yeah, I did quit my job last year to travel for 6 months. This was something my husband and I had been thinking about doing for a very long time. It was a scary thought, but when it came down to it, we just said to ourselves, like, we have many more decades of work ahead of us. When it comes down to it, like a 6 months blip of not working is like really nothing. And yeah, it was terrifying, but it was 100% worth it. It was scary finding a new job, but we managed to do it just fine. So that is like definitely part of our strategy around like balancing work and travel. We're repeat offenders. We've done this many times where we'll like quit our jobs, travel for a few months and come back. Um, and it just works for us, we save up a lot of money and then we take a nice break and then we go back to the grind. So yeah, if it's something you're thinking about doing, definitely reach out to me because I have a lot to say about it.
I've heard people say on that note that they're worried about not being able to find a job or paying the expenses at home of your apartment, your rent, and coming back and explaining why you have this gap in your resume.
Mm,
Do you feel
yeah.
like employers have asked about that, or do you have an answer for them? Do you tell them?
I tell them the truth, and so far that has worked fine. I mean, I work in the tech industry, and like realistically, this is I see this a lot in the tech industry, and the tech industry is like famously pretty chill about like flexible working conditions. So like it is a good industry to work in if you're planning to do this kind of thing. I will also say though, like I am in a senior role, and as I've become more senior in my day job work, like I have found it's a lot easier to find new jobs.
Yeah.
Um, so that was like kind of strategic as well. Like with this last 6 month trip we did, we waited for a moment where we both felt like pretty confident in our like hireability coming back. And we also do a lot to make sure that like we have a strong network. So the job that I got coming back was like thanks to a network connection. And yeah, I think it's important to just be honest about like your lifestyle. And my employer was just like, hey, like that's fine. We appreciate that you take time to like focus on yourself. The
Yeah.
right employer will see it as a benefit. Um, but yeah, I think like there's obviously risk involved. Like if you have a lot of costs, like my husband and I live like pretty simply. We don't have a lot of financial responsibilities. We don't have a mortgage. So like there wasn't a lot on the line for us, and we sublet our apartment while we were gone, so like didn't need to worry about that. So it's going to be like a different situation for everyone going into this, but I think with like the right amount of planning and strategy, like it can work.
Yeah, I agree. I've thought about that a lot too. Or like I've quit my job before to travel long term, and it was a little bit more difficult when you're more junior into the role and you kind of just start your career. But as you get experience, people see the value in that, and you taking 6 months off in the grand scheme of things is not the end of the world to most
Yeah.
employees, I
The first
think.
thing I said, like every interview I went into, I was just like, I have been off for 6 months and I'm excited to work again. And people love to hear that. So there's definitely a
Yeah.
way to spin it in your favor.
Yeah. Or even letting them know, like during your time off, like, you've been listening to podcasts about marketing, you've been keeping up with trends. So you're still hireable just because you went and traveled and you got real world experiences as well.
Mhm.
So that's important. Emily's a little bit different. You set up your life to work and travel, so you don't have a 9 to 5. So tell us about how you decided to do that and how you did it.
Yeah, so I've always
Mm, love
so
you.
oh
So,
um yeah, okay, sorry. So I guess like I've always wanted that dream of being more so like digital nomad, of being able to travel, work. I just didn't know what capacity that was, at 19, 20 years old. But through COVID, one of the fortunate things that came out of it was I was laid off from my full-time job for 3 years, essentially on and off, because I was working in the gym as a sales manager. So it was the last to open up. And it gave me a lot of time to work on my side hustle. I was already like freelancing to fund my travel budget of using like my vacation days at the time. But yeah, over the time, I just started getting more clients, more work, more projects, putting out like content creation. And eventually it came to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm at where my salary is now. Do I make the switch into self-employment? Which was still so scary. But, with what Erin was saying, it just, you got to plan, you have to understand like what I guess is going into. So that's where I'm at now. And now I'm able to have that flexibility of working and traveling.
and something important to note that we've talked about too is that just because you don't have a 9 to 5 doesn't mean you're not working. Like you're not just traveling all the time. You are really good at setting up your schedule, and you still have clients to answer to. It's not like you're just roaming around.
No, so I mean, like, as much as Instagram might let us know that like people are just traveling and I might look like I'm traveling all the time, I'm not going to show you the boring of me just sitting on my computer. But I think it's a really important topic and like misconception that people just think that, oh, you're freelance or digital nomad, whatever you want to call yourself, that you just get to travel full time. So while I've had the opportunity and created those opportunities to like have that flexibility. It also comes with like the non-negotiables. Like if I want to get paid, I have to work. And so that is creating a schedule, it's creating a routine, boundaries and systems. And then also to what like Haley and Erin were both saying, when I take on new clients, I'm very open and honest that I do travel. And it doesn't mean like, just because Alex and I are going on a 2-week trip in Spain, I'm still working. So send me emails. Like I'm not officially taking time off unless I'm letting you know that I'm officially out of office, right?
And making sure you're in places with Wi-Fi, because I have panic run to an Airbnb
Yeah.
or like somewhere through the airport to find Wi-Fi when you're about to hop on a call with a client, someone you're like, oh my God, the Wi-Fi is not working at this airport.
Yeah.
So that's also a tricky piece. And Kateryna, you are part of the Travel Massive community and finding communities. Can you tell us about finding communities of like-minded people and how that helps inspire and motivate you to make travel a big part of your life?
Yeah, for sure. Well, because Sandra, you and I met through Travel Massive. I've also been personally a long-standing member of Travel Massive, and what it is, it's an international community specifically built for travel industry professionals. And so there are chapters that exist all over the world. They create various networking events and learning opportunities, and you can also come and meet members from destination marketing organizations. So that way you kind of create a bigger network and also find again people who are like you who come to those networking events. As you recall, they get pretty fun. So with that, I actually ended up taking over the Toronto chapter last year. We're, I guess, on the year anniversary for that for a whole new team. So that's one of the big ones for people who are in the industry. But for people who are not necessarily in the industry, I'm also a member of this community called Wonderful. It's Women in Travel. And they have, that one is a paid organization, but they do have two levels of membership. One of them is a creator, one of them is a traveler. So even if you have no interest in blogging or being a content creator, you can still come on a bunch of these trips and then meet other women or talk to them in a online community. And if you're solo travel and if somebody lives in that destination like Boston, you can meet up with them, potentially even stay at their house. So I kind of love the idea of that as well, is that you kind of are alone, but you can find other people that you know through a reliable source.
Yeah. What I've really loved about being part of the Travel Massive community, two things. One, you have the meetups, like the happy hours or whatever that happens in the city. That's super easy to meet other people, is you get to just incessantly talk about travel, which sometimes I feel like with friends who are not as into it, you're like, oh, they don't really want to hear about this and they don't want to see my million pictures. But everybody who comes to these events, they definitely do, and they have their own stories to share. So that's been really fun. And the other piece is just being inspired by people, and you want to stay motivated and to balance your life like this if it's a priority for you and a goal to travel, but also just making things fun when you're not traveling. Going to, like, we just went to Guelph, which is only an hour out of Toronto. We had a whole
Yeah.
day of it and it felt like a fun little trip, but we didn't leave Ontario. So finding those opportunities of how to bring travel into your life in a smaller way as well has been really great. Um, so the second biggest piece besides time is, of course, money that comes into play with traveling. And yeah, so between budgeting, prioritizing, saving, and having side hustles, I think these are all things that come into play. So this question's for any of you. If you want to talk about how you budget, how you prioritize spending, like are there things that you give up, expenses you give up to prioritize travel?
I can hop in. I think so. This year's a little different for me because most of the trips are through that I get, on assignment for the magazines that I write for. So that has been a little different this year. But I think in the past with budgeting, I'll kind of mix up my time depending on where I'm going. And I still, I'm 32 today and I still stay in hostels. I think it's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to kind of budget, and especially if you're solo traveling, just go from place to place. So I'll try when I'm in country to kind of mix those in, with hotels or with Airbnbs just to save a little money if it's an extensive trip. Um, I think when it comes to budgeting and saving before, depending on, where I'm going and looking at the costs and how expensive that's going to be, I'm kind of a big spreadsheet gal. I like to plan ahead and, kind of know the expenses and what I want to do. Like if there's any activities that, I'm like, I absolutely have to do that, but it costs a few $100s. Then I'll kind of add that in and kind of figure out, what spending money I need and how much I need for flights. But I think once I'm actually in a destination, I'm a bit more spontaneous and actually don't end up spending as much money as I thought I would spend. Um, I like to keep it pretty low key. So I've started trying to not, sway away from the spreadsheets and planning as much. But yeah, I think just looking at the location and the costs and what other people have been spending is really helpful.
Yeah. I totally agree. And even before the trip, I feel like there's, like you're saying, you're 32 and staying in hostels. I'm 31 and have never lived alone. Like I'll always have a roommate because it just cuts your cost of living down by a lot. And that's like something that you kind of have to figure out. What are you willing to give up for the travel money? Um, Erin, how did you start? You love spreadsheets too. And
Yeah,
we've
I was gonna
shared
say,
most.
Haley, I'm all over the spreadsheets as well. Like both in my home life, but also on social, I share like very detailed trip breakdowns of like what my husband and I spend on every trip. We did it for a 6 month trip, so like you can see exactly where all of our money went on that trip. But I would say like the main thing is just that like it's pretty simple. My husband and I just make travel a financial priority. It's been this way for us for years. Um, a big focus on us for us has been to just like increase how much we earn. We did focus a lot on our careers over the last few years, and like part of that was that we wanted like financial stability at home, but we also wanted to like increase our ability to travel and go to places that were like a little more expensive, because we spent most of our 20s doing like very budget backpacking. And also I should add, like, I also blog, I podcast, I do make like a pretty decent income from that as well. So actually, like, my blog funds most of our travels at this point, which is amazing. Blogging is a really fantastic way to like increase your earning, but I will caution everyone, it takes a lot of time to get there. It is a long game to get there, but it was worth it for me. And like other than that, I would just say like my husband and I live a very simple life at home in Toronto. We have avoided lifestyle creep. We are not consumers. We don't buy a lot of stuff. Like we have the same TV we've had for 14 years. Yeah, we keep our life pretty simple. Like we enjoy life in Toronto. Like we will spend on going out for dinner, like going to an event, but we don't buy a lot of stuff. And that sounds like so simple, but I think it really does make a difference because like I have friends who are spending like tons of money on clothes and iPhones and like who knows what else. When you don't buy stuff, it's pretty incredible how much money you can save. So I would say like honestly, when people ask me this, I just say like a good exercise is to spend a month tracking every single transaction you make. And at the end of the month, like analyze where everything went and just look for areas where you can reduce your spending. And a lot of the time it'll come down to like consumer goods that you're buying. So yeah, I would say like if you're wondering where to start, that's a good place to start. Track for like 1 to 3 months.
Yeah, I did that too with the monthly tracker and realized that a huge impact actually comes from smaller things. Like if you're buying 4 coffees out a week, cut that down to two. If you're going out for drinks with friends and getting, let's say a total of 6 cocktails a week, like cut that down to one or two. And you don't have to
Yeah.
completely give up your life and your social life. Like social lives cost money, like to see your friends, you have to
Yeah.
spend money, but finding little ways to cut down on that that's been my
I'll
trick.
add, like, that is actually another huge benefit of remote work. I've been remote working for like 6 years now, and I noticed like a huge difference when I started remote working because, like, I don't buy coffee in the morning. I rarely buy lunch. Like, I don't order takeout anymore, and I do not buy clothes because, like, I go out with my friends. They know what I wear. Like, no one cares. So I'm not going to an office. I felt a lot more pressure to like have nice clothes when I went to the office.
Yeah, that's true. But for people who do have to go to the office, there's like, clothing swaps you can go to in a lot of cities. There's consignment stores have gotten super popular. You can find things on like Facebook Marketplace, I guess. Finding like thrifty ways or outfit repeating. I always talk about outfit repeating. I'm like one pair of work pants and that's all they're getting at the office. It's the same pair.
Yeah, I have two work pants and I just mix and match them with different tops. And everyone every day they're like, "Oh, we love your outfit." And I'm like, "Oh, I actually wore these like a few days ago and just washed them." So I think that's another hack is just to hop on what Erin was saying. I think cutting costs in any way possible on things that you don't necessarily need. Um, like I've had the same Honda Civic 1998 since I moved to the States. So I've had it for 20 years now, and it's extremely rusty. It has no air conditioning, but it gets me to work. And all of my friends are like, "Oh, don't you want to get a new car? Like you have the money." And I always say to them, I'd rather spend that money on travel and just keep my car. So I think, like Erin said, just prioritizing what's really important to you.
Yeah. And increasing income, that's something that we don't talk about enough as well. I've always, until I took over Origin last year, I've always had a restaurant job on the side, and that's been able to pay for my travels over the last few years. So, and just like with blogging, it's not easy. It's not easy to go to work after work, but sometimes while you're building up your career or just wanting to have that extra income, it's important. Which, Kateryna, you've got a lot of different ventures. You can jump in on that.
I tend to agree pretty much with everything everybody else said. It's about priorities and about being, not necessarily a frugal spender. Like I do like certain pieces of luxury in my life, be it going out or a specific piece for my home. But it's kind of like I have two rules for myself that if I don't love it, I don't buy it. And if I don't need it, I don't buy it. So it's kind of around that, and minimizing my own waste and kind of living more sustainably also allows you to save more money as you go. Um, Being a freelance worker, it's also one of those things where on some trips I can still work remotely. On some trips, especially if they're destination or media trips, they're incredibly busy. So if anything, I come back home to more work. So I try to maximize the amount of billable hours that I have between the trips to make sure that I'm not completely wasting away while I'm traveling for free, because nothing is free. But the other thing I think is we haven't talked about yet is finding sort of the points and different sort of point programs that work for you and focusing on those one or two different programs, because if you have too many, you kind of tend to spread yourself thin in this spending. So for me, I tend to focus on like one hotel program and one airline program. Being Canadian, it has to be Aeroplan, but those things, they can offer you like some really cool benefits in terms of getting your flights for free, because if you maximize that earning on it, since I started kind of using all of the possible tricks to maximize my points, I might not always have status, but I always have enough points to fly for free to like Montreal or New York, making sure that you get those like the good weekday flights and so on, and different credit card perks. Yeah.
That is something I have not mastered. It's figuring out how to use
We
our
can talk
points
about
cards.
it when I see you.
Yeah. Yeah, we can do a separate chat. I always feel like every time I meet Americans, they're like, "Oh, I flew to Hawaii for free." And like all I did was buy one thing. Like I don't know how you do that. But
Oh
they
no,
have a lot of card
ours don't
options.
work like that. Ours, especially with domestic credit cards that we have in Canada, a lot of them, it's highly not advised to spend those points on long distance travel because you pay a lot more in taxes. So it kind of becomes even almost more wasteful. You could go on 2, 3 trips across Canada versus one trip into Europe, for example. But sometimes it does happen. I flew direct from Toronto to Lisbon, and I spent not a ridiculous amount of points and only like $100. So that's like a good deal.
Emily, you are the flight hacker. How do you do it?
I mean, again, like repeating essentially what everyone has said. But I am definitely a big Google Flights person. I think I like when I click on my internet, it's like, you visit this site often. I'm like, I do. But I really like paying attention to flight deals and when certain airlines will put out deals. Like essentially, how am I trying to say this? If you're looking to travel, in the spring, around this time, like the 3 to 4 months, I think it is, that a lot of airlines will kind of drop the price and then it'll go back up. So just paying attention to that. And then again, echoing what, having a specific credit card to collect points, and then just knowing the different platforms of where you'll actually get discounts and not just like the fake discounts where they say it's 40% off, but it's really not 40% off. Yeah, so I kind of have like a list of different platforms and websites that I'll use depending on what our destination is or what we need from it.
Yeah. I am mildly convinced that Travel Tuesday is fake, and I feel like everybody they all raise their prices in like October and then they pretend that the flight prices are lower on Travel Tuesday. Like this is not a good price for this flight.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Oh,
on the note of that, finding destinations is obviously very important, and choosing destinations can impact both how you can travel more in terms of like time and flight time and the logistics of getting there. So, Haley, how do you choose your destinations and plan your trips? You were talking about long weekends, so does flight time affect that? How do you choose where you're gonna go?
Yeah, so usually my editors will reach out with somewhere they want me to go or a destination, and I've had to turn a lot of them down because of the distance. So I think, if I'm planning ahead and I know it's somewhere far away, obviously back to using time off, I can utilize the PTO. But typically, if I'm going for that long weekend, like a Friday to Monday or Friday to Tuesday, I'll look for something that's ideally under 6 hours. So a lot of my travel lately has been around like the Caribbean for trips. So again, just making sure it's under a certain amount of time. I think looking at layovers as well, especially if you're doing a long weekend trip, is really important. I just got back from a trip not too long ago, and um, the layover, I think, was about 3 hours, which wasn't too bad. And I actually do like layovers because I like people watching and just walking around airports. But we ended up getting delayed significantly, and we were stuck in Puerto Rico for, I think it was 6 hours, it ended up being. So obviously that was out of everyone's hands, but I think that also like really plays a factor into looking at flights and destinations and just making sure like for the small amount of time that I am going, I'm seeing a lot of that place and I'll have enough time to do kind of what I want to do and what I want to see.
Yeah, or like even lining up flights if you're going for the long weekend, if there's something like Thursday night and you get there Friday morning and then you have the entire day Friday instead of places that aren't as well connected. Like Toronto to Central America, Central and South America is quite poorly connected. So typically, like I literally spent all day getting back from Costa Rica yesterday, which like should just be a quick flight, but they're just not well connected. So I think I've also tried Google. You can Google like direct flights to Lima, and then you can see like which cities fly where and flight maps and things like that, which can help you figure out how to get the right flight. Emily, besides good Wi-Fi, how do you figure out where you're going to go, especially for your longer trips when you're away?
Yeah, so it all depends, I guess, on the trip that we're doing. So a little bit of background. Alex, my boyfriend, he has a 2 week in, 2 week out schedule. So he flies to a remote mine way up in Northern Ontario. And so when he's home, he's off for 2 weeks, which is nice. And so we've been very lucky to have a good chunk of time to go do some travel. So obviously Wi-Fi, because at the end of the day, I'm still working when I go on these trips. Um, but sorry, I lost track of what I'm saying. Um, can you repeat your question, actually?
Good Wi-Fi connection. You've also told me like figuring out where there's good service, like in parks and stuff too, so you know that you
Oh.
can be connected and
Yeah,
you can
so I mean,
use.
yeah, at the end of the day, like Wi-Fi or hotspotting my phone, I definitely need because, like I said, like I am definitely working. So I make sure that I do have everything prepared. I will read reviews on different hotels or anything that we're staying to make sure like the Wi-Fi is good. And or if not, like Googling some like co-working places depending on where we're going. If I want to go set up for the day or an afternoon, finding different coffee shops that are maybe more laptop friendly. So I try and find destinations that have those resources. Like when we went over to Portugal and Spain, there was endless amounts of it, but maybe going to somewhere in Central or South America, it might not be as applicable or like there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So yeah.
I've thought about that as well when I'm like combining my remote working with just traveling, choosing places where like my Peru trip when we're hiking, I'm like, okay, well, this is not the time to be working and there will not be service on the Salcantay trek. So those are days that you use your PTO for. And then like Haley was saying, the flex days of like, you have a remote working day, but maybe you want to spend that in a city where you know that you'll have good Wi-Fi. So choosing that strategy. And Erin, you always talk about going back to places you love and not country counting. What makes you go back to a place?
Yeah, I guess I just love going back to places because with every trip, you just get to know it better. And this is like why I would say I am anti-country counting. I think it like gamifies travel in a way that can be really harmful. It like shifts the focus of your travels to like account versus like experiencing a place. So there are many countries that I've been back to now like three, four, five, six times. And it's because every time I go back, I have a different experience, a deeper experience, and I learn more. Um, and like the reality is with a 1, 2, or even 3 week trip to a place, like there's only so much that you're going to see and learn. So for example, like my husband and I went back to Japan this year for the second time, and we know we will be going back like at least 2 more times because it's a big country. Like there's only so much you can experience with one trip. So yeah, I just think repeated trips to a place gives you the chance to get to know it in depth. And I also love it because like familiarity is a nice feeling. I've been to Nepal 3 times now, and like the third time I went, I landed there and I immediately felt like just happy because like I knew it already and it just felt like safe in a sense because it wasn't going to be this like whole hurdle again of like learning the basics, like the cultural basics of being there. And we had friends there, like we knew people there. It's just a very different experience once you've sort of like built a community in a place and you go back over and over. So I always tell people like if you really like a place, like don't second guess it. Just go back. Like forget the country count. Like just go back to the places you love.
Yeah, and I think that perspective also helps you see a lot more of the country where I've had people ask about our Egypt trip where they're like, oh well, why don't you do like Cairo, Amman, and Istanbul? And then we get 3 countries knocked off. I'm like, because even 10 days in Egypt is still not enough. And Cairo was probably my least favorite part of Egypt. There's just so much more beyond when you're getting the capital cities are the easiest to get to. So of course that's usually where we're landing, but they're not often my favorite place in the country. But so I really love that. And you've been to Iceland a bunch of times, so you can't do Iceland in one day or
No,
one
Iceland's
trip.
pretty small, but I'm like, I'm going to stretch this as long as I can. I'll probably be going for the rest of my life. I love it so much.
And it gives you the opportunity to see more remote places when you go back too, and you're like getting a taste for things and then going back to see more. Um, and Kateryna, you work with tourism boards and hotels. What makes you say yes to that destination, and what would make you say no?
A few things. But first, I was going to say a comment on Iceland. I think it's also seasonally so different. So I've seen it in the winter, and I'm like, no, I have to go in the summer. It's like a completely different planet.
Yeah.
But in terms of working with destinations, it's usually whether or not it's relevant to how I travel, because I really put a lot of emphasis on travel in the way I travel as not a nomadic traveler because I do also work, and so it's kind of like the life work balance and so on. So if it's places that I'm not interested in going, or there are activities on the itinerary that I'm not interested in participating in because I wouldn't do them, and there are too many of those things, I would say no. Distance is a major one, as was discussed. If it's somewhere that it takes me 2 to 4 days to travel and I'm only there for 3 days and I can't extend the trip, that's also becoming quite wasteful in terms of time and sustainable resources, and just really stressful on your body. Like you can fly as much as you can, but every now and then jet lag really gets you.
Yeah.
So those would be like the main things. From the creator side, there's also depending on who you travel with and how you travel with. So sometimes if it's collaborations, they might have very specific expectations for what they'd like you to deliver. And sometimes they're unreasonable. And so you kind of have to decide if that's a place that you really want to go to and you're okay to deal with their requests, or if it's something that you want to ask for budget. And if they don't have it, then just go and stay somewhere on your own. So it's a combination of, I guess, interest, budgeting, and time.
Yeah. How much do you think Instagram and social media affects people's decision on where they're gonna go?
I think incredibly, just judging by a lot of places that I've been, we travel to, people just, there's some destinations really have become like Instagram destinations, right? Maybe they used to be Pinterest, but right now, when places are like advertised as Instagrammable, I tend to avoid those places because I know they're going to be super, super busy. My sister and I did a trip through Italy last year, which was a heavy year for Italy. And we went to everywhere except all of these super major places that everybody else was going to. We went to like the second biggest city or a small village, and we had an amazing time. People were messaging me saying that I absolutely had to go to Positano. And I was like, that's exactly why I don't want to go there, because everyone is there right now from North America. And seeing that firsthand, I think the only popular place we went to was Alberobello, and every with the white conal houses,
Yeah.
and just seeing the crowds that only come there for the photos and they don't really appreciate the culture, and they're not the kind of, it's all about traveling sustainably and also ethically and culturally consciously. So I try not to be in places where that's impossible or where people will just annoy me with their behavior.
Yeah, or the places where they're asking tourists not to go, like that was happening with Hawaii a little
Mm-hmm.
while ago, and trends come and go. And I think for me, I'm like I would never go to Italy in the summer, like ever. There's too many people, and I've also seen a lot about like duping countries. So instead of Italy in the summer, like go to Albania or Montenegro. And if you're going, like, what are you really going for? What are your interests? And there's other places that offer those things as well and that want the tourism and are asking for it.
Yeah, so many. But I do have to say though, the whole idea of kind of duping clothes or countries, it kind of makes me feel a certain way. All of these countries, they feel they're different cultures, and though there might be similar architecture because of colonialism, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be feeling the same. So I think sometimes just being kind of like clear that it actually is a different
Yeah.
country is very important.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
Montreal
I guess.
is not my friends
Yeah, not that it's the same, but if you want the blue water, you want like a
vibe.
certain
Yeah,
aspect of this place, like you can find something, you can find that same kind of feeling, I guess, or atmosphere, although it will be different. But yeah, just finding places that are a little bit less crowded and trends come and go too. So like Banff has been absolutely crazy now. And when people ask me if they should go, I'm like, you should probably wait until the hype dies down because it's not fun when you
shoulder
have to
season.
wait. Yeah, and you can't be spontaneous in those places. Like you have to like pre-book your bus to the lake in like months in advance. You have to like pre-book your hotel. Everything has to be like planned out, and there's not a ton of room for being spontaneous or like finding things that are a little bit off the beaten path because of that. So, but to people who are like, well, but I really want to go there, like, just wait a few years. People will go somewhere else, and those places will get less busy, and trends come and go. As I also think that places get popular for a reason. Like there's a reason that everybody wants to go there because to see something that's magical, and it is. But yeah, shoulder seasons are also great for that. They're finding less traveling outside of school holidays when people's
Absolutely.
families aren't there. Um, but yeah. So for one last fun question for everybody, what's a place that you feel very drawn to but haven't made it yet?
I'd really like to make it down to like South America, going into like Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina. Um, Alex and I really like the outdoorsy things. And so I feel like there's just a really good mix of like culture, food, experiences, and a lot of opportunities to be outside.
Yes, There is. I love South America.
I think for me, Greenland. Um, I've been to Iceland 10 times and love it. So I've always just wanted to go to Greenland because a lot of my friends who live in Iceland have gone over there a bunch and it just looks amazing. And I know they're trying to push for tourism right now. And, I've seen some of the pictures of people who have gone there, and it's definitely very high on my bucket list.
They're building a new airport there, so that'll be more accessible in the coming years. Better get there soon.
I'm a little worried for Greenland, I'm not gonna lie, because I also want to go, but when they announced the new airport, I was just like, here we go. Like it's gonna become the new Instagrammable place and give it like 3 years and it'll be Iceland levels of problems with tourism. So I hope they are preparing. I hope they're looking to Iceland for advice because Iceland has done a lot to encourage like the spreading out of tourism around the
Mhm.
island. A place for me is Mongolia. We were supposed to go on our last 6 month trip and we couldn't make it work. So it'll be happening soon. It's been somewhere I want to go for a really long time. I'm just like very intrigued by it. I love overlanding. So yeah, that'll be
Super
happening in the
cool.
next year or so, I think.
Amazing. And Kateryna?
I'm like, can I say everywhere?
Yeah, literally everywhere I
Uh,
haven't been.
everywhere I haven't been. I've been really obsessing over Georgia for a few years just because of the history that they've been through and the way they've been reinventing themselves. And also, I do a lot of travel around food and wine. And Georgia is the birthplace of wine. So, where to go other than there to learn more
Yeah,
about it.
I feel the same. I feel like I've told people that and they're like, oh, like the state? I'm like, no, the country. And we have to. One of mine is like van life in New Zealand. I was supposed to do it with when I was in Australia, and it's so far away that for us from Canada, it's hard to fit it in when you're working and only get 3 weeks of vacation off. But I didn't get to do it because of COVID, so that was one that I need to go back to. Maybe quit for a few months and go van life in New Zealand. But yeah, any final thoughts before we jump off? No? Thank you so much to all of you for coming and for being part of this. I have this recorded, so I'll put it up on YouTube. You can share. I'll put all of your Instagram handles so people can find you and connect with you and keep talking about traveling.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Sandra.
Yeah, thank you for hosting.
Thanks,
Chat
Sandra.
soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.